The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 50.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everyone, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, aka Father Fett, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. And today we are discussing Season 3 of Star Wars Rebels, Episodes 12 and 13, The Ghosts of Geonosis, as we continue to kind of follow Rex through Star Wars Rebels. And the only one joining me on the panel tonight is Andrew Hermes. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Father. It's just us tonight.
It's just us. The other panelists all had either children that they were taking care of or another thing come up. So this is a special duo episode. So it's going to be great.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So I don't really think that there's really much in terms of news recently. So with Bad Batch being kind of the last major thing that was announced, but that we kind of talked about last time. So we will jump right into these two episodes. It very much felt like it didn't really feel like a two-parter. It felt like one long 40-minute episode.
I totally agree. You know, I would say the first episode really, I mean, at least for me, didn't really add much or present much. It was just kind of all set up and exposition for, you know, what would happen in episode 13. So yeah, I know right out the gate kind of started slow for me, but yeah, right at the end with the cliffhanger and all that, it's really where it starts to pick up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate on one level 40 minutes to kind of flesh out a story and a little bit of a not just action. So this was kind of a nice kind of ease into the story. It wasn't really there wasn't any like, you know, major events that kind of happened. In fact, I suspect, and not that this is at all a bad thing, but I was just kind of looking at the when this released, and it was released in January of 2017, just a month after Rogue One hit theaters. So right. Everybody, of course, was harping in on the Saw Gerrera connection, which was kind of, I think, the key of the whole 2 episodes, and really what they were really able to kind of go into Saw Gerrera's backstory a little bit more where Rogue One wasn't able to, and you get to see him just a couple years before Rogue One, which was really a cool thing to be able to see as well. One thing that I thought was really comical about these episodes, and I think again it was intentional, was the Death Star is the underlying major threat in everything, and nobody except for Click Clack can at all pinpoint, you know, that's actually the menace of the whole episode, but it's kind of missed by everyone.
Yeah, he even literally draws it out for them.
Yeah. Well, and I love how they
think it's the egg.
Right. Yeah, it's the egg, or it's the Imperial logo, or it's the rings of Geonosis.
Right.
I imagine Click Clack is just mentally, you know, facepalm.
Yeah.
You know, but
yeah, what's funny is usually when, more times than not, I think when they encounter like a species that, you know, speaks a different language, they usually have someone on the team that can understand them. And in this one case where it would have helped so much, they could not understand his language. So they're just trying to figure out what he's saying through his drawings and, you know, through like hand movements and you know, emotive sort of body language. So I just found that like kind of, I was thinking about that. I was like, man, this episode could have been done in like real quick if They just could have understood what he was trying to say.
They needed C-3PO or equivalent to just say, hey, they were building the Death Star on Geonosis. That's the information,
Exactly.
Get out of here. Instead, we have Ezra, who is very expressive in his trying to communicate with Click Clack, which, okay, right. That's Ezra.
Yeah.
So
they even like, they were like, hey, Ezra, why don't you talk to him? See what I don't think anyone was real keen on trying to understand what he was saying. And obviously Saw Gerrera had his own methods, but yeah, it kind of fell on Ezra's shoulders, for better or worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he always had the animal connection. So I guess,
right.
Geonosian being a bug, he's sort of lumped into that same category.
I guess so.
One of the other cool things about this was that Forrest Whitaker is the voice of Saw Gerrera, so it's the same actor as Rogue One. And I really liked his voice acting because you can almost hear echoes of where he goes in Rogue One, but he's not there yet. So there's a similarity, but he's not quite as unhinged as he is in Rogue One.
Yeah, in Rogue One, it's almost like he speaks. It's more raspier. It's kind of like you can tell like he's been through some more battles and maybe he suffered an injury that affected his voice. But yeah, like you pointed out, there are shades of that. He kind of, you can tell like obviously as amazing as the voice cast is, for Rebels and Clone Wars and everything Star Wars animated, if someone like Forrest Whitaker really stands out in the cast, and you can see what kind of brilliant actor he is, Academy Award winning actor. He really stood out, and for an animated show with a character like him who could easily just be sort of one note stereotypical, sort of like war torn, someone who lost someone and is out for revenge. He kind of brings more dynamic to that. And I'm glad they were able to have him, portray his character, again for this animated these animated episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the interesting things that I was learning about was as I was kind of doing some research on these episodes is in universe, what happened to Saw Gerrera is that he actually gets a bit of he gets poisoned by the insecticide, if you will, that was used on the Geonosians. So that's actually what causes his voice to get raspier, and why in Rogue One he needs that respirator that it purifies his lungs, and so that was because of the time that he spent on Geonosis. So I thought that was a very interesting connection there. And then I just lost my other train of thought. What had you just mentioned?
I was talking about Forrest Whitaker's performance and how it was how he made the character more dynamic than just stereotypical.
Yes. Because and where I wanted to go there, and that's exactly where we'll go in our discussion too, was that I loved how he is on the same side, so to speak, as Kanan and the rest of the Ghost crew, but their tactics are vastly different. Their what they're willing to do is very different. So their morality is very different. So you've got Saw on the ends totally justify the means side, and you've got Kanan and Ezra in the group that are sort of not willing to go quite as far. So it was great to pin those against each other. I put in my notes that there was this constant tension with Saw Gerrera. They're on the same side, but they're also not, which was really cool to see kind of played out. So with that, we'll kind of jump into the discussion because we'll get to that. The episode starts with Senator Bail Organa making an appearance back in Rebels. And he informs, he wanted to tell the Ghost crew himself what this mission was all about. That was a secret mission, and Ezra's complaining that he doesn't know what it is yet. But Senator Organa briefs them on the mission, and they're being sent to Geonosis to find this rebel team that was originally sent to investigate the disappearance of the Geonosians. And the missing team went dark after they discovered an energy source on the surface. And at that point, Rex knows that they're going to go try to find Saw Gerrera. They have a history. In fact, I haven't seen the episodes in the Clone Wars, but Saw Gerrera makes an appearance in the Clone Wars. So there's definitely some history there. They arrive on Geonosis, and they find the signal for the energy source, and so they head down to the planet, and of course they land in the midst of a heavy sandstorm, and so they land and they decide to split up because there's the energy source is on the surface of the planet, couple clicks away, and Rex, Kanan, Ezra, and Chopper are going to go to Gerrera's last known transmission to go search for him. And so Rex kind of leads the crew off to find the last transmission place for Gerrera. And they find a temple built by the Geonosians. And it was interesting. It was I think it was probably earlier in the episode already at this point, but Rex must have mentioned the Geonosians, and Ezra asks if the bugs all built this. And so he kind of he starts asking about the bugs, and I want to make that point because what I found interesting is the names that were used. So at this point, Ezra is calling them bugs, but later on, once he meets Click Clack, he kind of forms his own name for him. Mm-hmm. But I also thought it was really interesting that Saw Gerrera never calls him by Click Clack. He never calls him a Geonosian until the very end of the episode. He only refers to him as a bug.
Bug, yeah.
So I kind of equated that to him refusing to see the person behind the enemy that he saw as the Geonosian.
Right.
So, and we'll talk more about that as we go, of course. But they get to this temple. There's no sign of Saw. We get a little bit of the backstory between Rex and Saw, because Rex tells Kanan that he knows Saw from way back and that he trained him and his sister Steela as local militia to fight against the Separatists. And this is where we learn that Steela was killed and Saw continued on, and he even formed his own rebel cell after the Empire took over. So we get at least a little sense of why Saw is as extreme as he is. He's got quite that trauma in his background. They continue to kind of search out this temple. They find these tunnels underneath, and this is where Ezra is asking more about the Geonosians, and Rex says that they look just like battle droids, but ugly, and that they smell. Which is interesting because Rex obviously has history on the planet. Geonosis would have been when he was more or less activated as a clone trooper. So he has ties back to episode 2 there and the planet. They continue down into these tunnels, and they find all these helmets that Rex is able to identify as part of Saw's team. But no living person is found. All just the helmets remain. And we get these kind of brief glimpses of a lone Geonosian who's kind of watching them from the shadows. And it was at this point that we start to sense Kanan. I mean, Kanan wants to go at this point. He says that they're out of their element. He wants to turn away and go back to their team. Even though they can't, Chopper can't contact Hera. So Kanan kind of wants to go back and regroup, and Ezra wants to continue on. And Rex also wants to continue forward. And Kanan being a good leader, I mean, he follows the consensus and goes with them. Yeah, and
he just senses that there's something wrong about this place. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's more than just like, you know, kind of thinking that they've, you know, hit a dead end, or like, you know, they just need to get back because, you know, they seem to found nothing, but helmets, you know, that kind of tell you that, oh, these guys are probably dead. Yeah, it's like he senses something bigger, and obviously we know ultimately, what that dark threat is, but yeah, it's Kanan I think would have probably would have not mentioned anything if he didn't sense that.
And it's interesting that you make that point, because after you watch both of these episodes, the threat on the planet really isn't that impressive. I mean,
right? Yeah.
The droids show up, and sure, there's a destroyer with a shield, and there's some destroyers on the surface, but really those were handled fairly easily. So Kanan, he's sensing the bigger threat, even though he can't put his finger on it.
Right.
Even though it's drawn out for him, and he still can't put his finger on it.
I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't blame him, because, I mean, even if he's seeing, if he's looking at that drawing and he's sensing something,
of course he's blind.
No one
too,
at this point has seen a Death Star. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's and no, I don't think anyone at that point would think that sort of technology or is possible. But yeah, it's like you said, it's something they never figure out by the end of these episodes. But yeah, at least Kanan, using the Force and all that, is sensing that there's something that's at least a threat enough for him to consider to go back.
Mm-hmm. And I can't harp too much on them for not recognizing the bigger threat, because if you had no context for what a Death Star was, if you saw a circle within a circle, you wouldn't have any idea what that actually meant.
Exactly.
So I know we as the viewer know exactly what it means, and it's obvious. But for them, of course, they didn't. But still, that's, I mean, and these episodes are, they're tying in a very direct way to Rogue One, but Rogue One was a direct tie to the Death Star, and the Death Star is definitely, becoming a larger and larger and larger threat as it becomes closer to completion and culminates in the movie New Hope. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for Kanan to sense that threat speaks to his ability as a Jedi, even though he can't quite pinpoint it. Anyway, so they continue to go explore these tunnels. That's when they are ambushed by all these battle droids. I loved Ezra's optimism. We can do this. And then when the destroyer shows up, he goes, "We can probably do this."
Right.
And with the destroyer pretty much going to overtake them, they're rescued from one of the side passages breaking open, and that's Saw Gerrera blasting through, and he and Rex have a moment of connection because of their shared history. And Saw then gets introduced to Kanan and Ezra, and mentions that he didn't expect to see any Jedi, and he suggests that something is happening on Geonosis. He also has this, not Force sense, but he has this sense that there was something big that the Empire was doing on Geonosis that he is desperate to get information about in order to strike back at the Empire. And we see that played out through these two episodes. We, of course, as the viewer, know that, yes, this was the place for the building of the Death Star. In fact, that was seen at the end of Revenge of the Sith. And I was watching Rebels Recon, and Pablo Hidalgo mentioned that so at this point, the Death Star is not being built at Geonosis. And when we see it in Rogue One, it is not at Geonosis. And Pablo had mentioned that, in fact, Saw Gerrera himself was getting close enough to discovering the Death Star project at Geonosis that those in the Empire got nervous, and so they moved the Death Star completely. So that's why when the Ghost shows up at Geonosis, all the debris around Geonosis is gone, because they're not building anymore. But back when they had gone there. One of the earlier seasons of Rebels, there was all the debris around. So the Death Star is not there, but that's exactly what was going on there that Saw is so desperate to find information on.
That's a cool little tidbit.
Yeah, there was a lot there. I was kind of just doing some research, and I love the connections to Rogue One, to A New Hope, to Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones. I mean, there's a lot of connections to the movies within these, especially for those who, Rebels isn't necessarily something that if you're just a fan of the movies that you would go and watch. But for those who have watched the movies and love getting into the animated series, these are fun connections that we can enjoy.
Yeah, it totally adds so much more to the experience. Yeah, if you watch the movies and sort of find those connections, it's really an added enjoyment and really for these like episodes like this, just on the surface, it's like a guy who's who lost his sister and is just like you mentioned, his tactics are more about like just doing whatever it takes to get the right answers and to get the mission done. And then you have Ezra and Kanan and Rex who have more doing it the right way, and those two ideologies kind of battling each other. And then it kind of ends with some sort of peaceful amicable ending, but if exactly all these connections, it adds so much more to it. And I think that to get the fullest potential out of these episodes, it's good to know all these to know all the lore, basically, at least cinematically.
Yep. For all the nitpicky issues that I may have with Disney purchasing Lucasfilm and going the direction that they went, right. One of the great things that I love about what they did is create the story group, and because they have this group of people that are very in tune to the lore and that are very in tune to if they add something in Rebels, how it connects to the movies or how it connects to the novels, and they all tie together. And definitely for the fans who read the novels, watch the animated shows, love the movies, these things are just Easter eggs for us to find and to know and to really enjoy and to just feel like this is a universe that's lived in and connected and really cool. So I really did appreciate that, and I loved seeing more of Saw Gerrera's backstory, because in Rogue One he's sort of just this character out of the blue that he's kind of unhinged and weird, and you don't really know much about him other than that he's an extremist, and so this and
he's kind of got a Darth Vader thing going on with him, like his breathing apparatus and what he's wearing. But
he's on the good side, but he's doing things badly on the good side. But these episodes flesh out his backstory and kind of lay the groundwork for he lost his sister, and that's the pain that he's struggling with, and that's what's prompted him to go to these extreme measures to retaliate. And knowing that and watching Rogue One, it's easier to at least understand where Saw Gerrera is coming from, rather than just kind of write him off as an extremist character that is just in the movie.
Right.
So we get a bit of a side plot happening here as well. Sabine and Zeb head out into the storm, and they go in search of the shield generator, or the energy source, and they find that it's a military grade shield generator and that it's fully operational. And so they decide to extract the deflector core. Apparently you can do that, and You know, it makes the outerwear must just extend the range of the shield, because they do pull out the deflector core, and they want to use it for chopper base. And Zeb points out the obvious question, and as I was watching it this morning again, I was like, yeah, the obvious question is what is this thing doing on the planet? Who is it for? What's it doing? And Zeb asked that question, and they, of course, don't have an answer for it. And we find out later that really it's just Click Clack is maintaining it kind of for no real reason. But so they go off and work on that. And meanwhile, Saw informs Kanan and the group the same thing, that there's a working shield generator on the surface, and they start to kind of reason that the battle droids that they had just encountered were not the ones keeping it operational, but that they in fact themselves were being maintained too. So there's some third party that was maintaining it, and Saw believed it to be the bugs, as he was calling them, the Geonosians who were doing the maintaining. And he blames the bugs for taking out his team, and with him being the only one that survived, which is...
And Kanan again just wants to leave.
Yeah. I after kind of your comments earlier, I think he's still got to be reacting to that deeper, darker menace that he's sensing. But yeah, he wants to go back and to regroup and report to Hera, and also too, I guess from a plot level, this adds more tension between him and Saw, because Saw is continually insistent that they go and find the bug and find out what's going on, where Kanan is a lot more cautious. So maybe there's both things going on there. Is from a plot level, it adds more conflict, and more sort of you get to see, you know, the two sides of their different perspectives a little bit easier. So Saw insists that they go and find this bug and find out what's going on, because the Empire wiped out the entire population of Geonosis, and they need to find out why. Ezra and Rex both agree, so they continue to move forward. But Saw does bring them to this large chasm shaft, kind of in the planet surface that has a direct connection to the surface of the planet, because they've gone underground, and this large shaft allows them to contact Hera, because they can get a signal out.
And of course, the bridge is gone.
Yep, of course,
as usual.
You know, but there's Jedi involved this time.
Yeah.
They do spot the Geonosian on the other side of the chasm, and Kanan does call Hera and warn her that there are operational battle droids and that they need to be careful. At which point it's just like, this is just how these Star Wars stories go, is the moment that they're informed of that, you know, Sabine and Zeb are called back to the ship, and the storm dies down, and Zeb sees a bunch of rocks, which of course are not, but they're destroyers covered in sand.
Yeah.
You know, and so they debate on how to get back to the Ghost, whether they just kind of sneak around or whether they, you know, use the Ghost cannons to fight them, but the Ghost cannons are all clogged up, and whether they can move the deflector core without waking them and bring that back to the ship. So that's actually what they decide to do, is to try to move the deflector core without touching or knocking into any of the droids and waking them up and being attacked. Hera calls Kanan and his team back, but again we sort of see that Saw is insistent that in order to do what's best, they need to find the one who controls the droids. That's the way to help, not to go back to the ship. And so Hera does agree that that's probably the best course of action, and Chopper actually uses his flashlight to search for the Geonosian on the other side of the chasm. And when they find him, he's startled, and he has the remote that he activates the battle droids on the surface. And so, of course, it all kind of breaks loose up above. And that's where Sabine and Zeb use the deflector core to create this tiny little shield around themselves only, where they're going to try to wait out the destroyer's attack, which in Star Wars fashion, of course, manages to last just the right amount of time.
Exactly.
You know? So anyway, so they hole up there with that. And meanwhile, the rest of the crew is going to try to get across the chasm, at which point Kanan does his his tactic of force launching Ezra across the chasm. And we have this really cool scene where he pulls down, or he has Rex and Saw break loose one of the bridges that's above.
Yeah.
And Kanan uses the force to levitate that bridge in place so that Rex and Saw Gerrera can cross over to the other side.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I loved at that point that the musical theme of from the Force theme was playing, and it just like, that's yep. Size matters not, as Yoda would say, and Kanan's being a full Jedi Knight there.
And of course, for a little more added dramatic effect, the bridge is toppling over, breaking apart as they're walking across, in progression.
Yeah.
So.
I sort of figured it was Kanan just letting it fall because he had less to levitate. But it also looked cool, or it added tension. All of that. But then what was really impressive is everybody gets to the other side, and then Saw asks about Kanan, and Kanan just jumps the whole thing by himself.
Yeah.
Like, obviously Ezra couldn't do that because he needed the help, but Kanan just
no problem.
Which was funny because then at that point Saw looks at Rex and says, I always forget that they can do that, and Rex says, yeah, but he's no Skywalker.
Yep. Yeah. I really appreciated that line.
And that's another line that you would not, if all you saw was this one episode, and none of the other Clone Wars, you wouldn't know the depth that comment had,
exactly.
and the connection that Rex had with Anakin. So Kanan is not offended, but also offended by that, and they continue to chase after the Geonosian, and they do sort of manage to track it down. Ezra and Chopper, try to get to it and cut it off, and they manage to really knock into each other, but Ezra is able to sense where the Geonosian is and manages to jump up and get to it. And of course, meanwhile, the shield protecting Zeb and Sabine is completely failing, and they're gonna be destroyed here in just a few seconds. And the remote for the droids is just coincidentally blasted by Saw, which deactivates all the droids, saving the day. And then the episode, that part of the episode ends with Saw confronting the Geonosian and asking what they were building for the Empire with quite a bit of force. So that kind of, and like I said at the beginning, it just rolls into the next episode. There isn't like this kind of hard cliffhanger that leads into the next episode. So we'll just kind of keep going because that's kind of how the two episodes were written. So part 2 picks up right at the same point. Saw is very rough in handling the Geonosian. He, keeps probing and asking what the Imperial secret was that was worth the lives of his team, and you can tell he's very hurt, emotionally by that, and labels the bug as the enemy.
Yeah, and Rex points out that he's unarmed, and And Saw is like, yeah, we can't underestimate these things, you know. And yeah, Saw just sees him as, you know, what he originally saw them as separatists, and yeah, he can't really let that go. So that's fueling his fire, so to speak, you know, when he's dealing with them.
Well, and he's sort of, I mean, he's seeing things from only his perspective, and he's refusing to see anything outside of that perspective. So, in just a little bit, when he does find the sonic blaster, the sonic weapon, that was in Click Clack's little home area, Saw sees it as confirmation that the bug is the enemy, and he's gonna hurt us if we don't hurt him first, you know, rather than see it as what it was, as him protecting the egg that he had. So yeah, it's
yeah, that's that bigger theme too of like what justifies war. You know, sometimes it's like, yeah, it's seeing something from just one perspective, like Saw is like, oh, we found this weapon, and you know, obviously they probably, you know, they want to use it to hurt innocent people. You know, sometimes that's, you know, we've had unjust wars come up because, you know, one government or one country or the other, you know, sees a threat, you know, just looking at some sort of piece of evidence from one perspective. And, you know, that a lot of times it's like, as we see by the end of the episode, and we just pointed out, the reason why he had the weapon is, you know, it really doesn't justify the way he was acting towards him. And and as obvious as the episode shows, like in this scene, where how afraid he is, and Ezra is saying like he's obviously afraid, right? Like he's obviously not, you know, he's not flexing any sort of muscle, you know. So can we please just recognize that? You know, it seems so obvious to us, but because he's so blinded by everything that's happened to him, it's not so obvious.
In fact, I mean, every time that the Geonosian is on camera, he is not at all he's not portrayed threatening at all. He's running away. He's Ezra senses his fear. I mean, even the way that he talks or makes the noise of his language, I mean, is very it's not threatening, you know, but all Saw can see and hear is, you know, this is the enemy, you know, he's tricking us. He has this sonic blaster. And that's where, because it was right at this point that Ezra goes and tries to talk to him. And Ezra determines that his name is now Click Clack.
Yeah.
Okay. But I thought that was, I mean, as silly as that sounds, it's a very crucial point, is that Ezra gave a name to the Geonosian. So Ezra could see the person behind the bug. And Saw refuses to call him Click Clack. He always calls him the bug. And again, that's because he refuses to see him as anything except the enemy that needs to be coerced and interrogated and tortured in order to give the information that he's seeking. And so I really, as cheesy as Click Clack is, I loved it because it's a name. And if you have the name, a name is an identity, and it reveals the person, and not just, you know, a face, or not just, you know, you can distance yourself emotionally from someone if you refuse to use their name, if you refuse to acknowledge their name, or if you just kind of label a group of people as a blanket group of people and you don't look at individuals. It is so much easier to just write them off, or to, you know, read into what you think their motives are, their goals, their desires, you know. And that's, I mean, that happens all the time. And then especially in times of war, whether it's war, you know, a world war, or war, you know, conflicts within a community or within a family. But, you know, if you just label the enemy as the ones who are fighting against me, you're not going to see the person behind the enemy. So I loved that dynamic, and actually where Saw gets to at the very end of the episode, because he has a little bit of growth that he goes through, which is really important, because that's the same thing that we have to be aware of in our own hearts is, with everything, the political divide, the religious divide, or cultural divide, or whatever divide that we want to divide our communities up, or our families up, or our world up. We can do the same thing, as we can just blanket label a group of people and think we have them figured out, and then we don't see the individuals. And yet, if you know the individuals, you're going to find that they're probably not exactly who you thought they were.
Yeah. And you could probably relate to them, more than you think. Yeah. Because, everyone kind of has had some sort of degree or instance where they've been, they've suffered, or they've been, persecuted in some sort of way, whether it's, within their own household or on a social level. So I think, everything you mentioned, it's really, those sort of this sort of theme is very relevant for the climate that we're in today. And I think, whatever side of the issues you're on politically or socially, I think if more people just heard personal stories from individuals on why they feel the way that they feel, why, maybe someone might feel like they're, not treated as equally, or why someone feels, or how someone feels like, why are we sort of like acting like, some people are better than others, this whole like, whether this whole Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, it's like, if we kind of dig deeper into, how our fellow neighbor, why they feel that way, I think everyone sort of has their own story. Right. And I think the more you kind of paint these things with a broad brush, if you're like, oh, I'm just on this side of the issue because I'm looking at people as just groups of people, and this group doesn't seem to align with my group, that's where we get into all the trouble that we're in right now. So, this is a perfect example of it. Obviously, this episode, came out 3 years ago, but there's never a time. I mean, there's never been a time in my lifetime where there wasn't some sort of, social issue going on, or some political divide, or war atrocities happening, So this sort of theme always, rings true, unfortunately, but I think if people kind of learn that lesson more and more, then, not to sound cheesy, but, the world would be a better place.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I hate politics. And this is not a political podcast, so we're not, at all going in that realm of things, but the political atmosphere is, again, you end up labeling people, on all sorts of issues. Right. And what I love about, our Catholic faith is like at the heart of what politics should be, and at the heart of everything that we do in community is at the heart of what Catholic social teaching is. And at the very heart of all of that is the dignity of the human person. Yeah. Yes, you might have different opinions than me. Yes, I may not agree with your opinions, and that is perfectly fine. You don't have to agree. But what is important is, no matter, your culture, your background, your, where you live, anything that differentiates us, what unites us is the fact that we're all human beings made in the image and likeness of God, and the dignity that we have as persons because of that. That can never be diminished. And that should be the starting point of everything we do in a political world. And unfortunately, that is not often what happens in our world of politics. And that's a whole nother podcast, and that's not where we're going. But the point, and again, that's why I loved this part, is that, Ezra names the Geonosian Click Clack, and he recognizes the person behind the bug, the soul behind the bug, and recognizes the dignity that the Geonosian has, where Saw does not, because he's just blanket labeling him as the enemy. And he gets to a bit of empathy at the end of the episode, which is really good.
It's an example we see, in our faith all the time, and what Christ teaches us. Like with Mary Magdalene, you had a whole group of people that just wanted to, judge her by, whatever it was, her appearance or her past, and the fact that she may have been, she was possessed by demons at one point, but Christ saw her as, as someone made in the image of himself, and that no one is greater than no one is past God's mercy. So it's like, he who sinned cast the first stone. It's like we've all done things that were sinful, or we regret, or that were wrong. So what really matters is, are we trying to be better people? Are our intentions to be good and to do good things? And if that's the case, then we all deserve to be treated as a child of God. So and we know that when we're being judged, on Judgment Day, we're going to be judged as an individual. We're not going to be judged as like a group of people, and that's something our faith reinforces, and that's something that we should act out in our earthly life as well.
Yep. So I know I'm jumping ahead, but you started this, so I'm blaming you. But
go ahead.
At one point, Saw is torturing Click Clack. So this is again a bit of a jump. But you had mentioned mercy, and Saw explicitly says, "Our enemy shows no mercy, neither can we." And that just really struck me, because that is, of course, so contrary to our belief and our faith and how we're called to live. And I did some again, I was kind of just doing some research on this a little bit, but even within war, even within conflicts, specifically war, I was looking up what the Catechism of the Catholic Church had to say about it, and the one line that I took from the Catechism, 2312, if you're interested. The Catechism says that the Church and human reason both assert the permanent validity of the moral law during armed conflict. So the moral law being, you show mercy. I mean, that would be part of the moral law. Pulling from Gaudium et Spes, another quote that I thought was super appropriate was Gaudium et Spes number 79 says that in regards to just war and wars, Gaudium et Spes says that state authorities and others who share public responsibility have the duty to conduct such grave matters soberly and to protect the welfare of the people entrusted to their care. But it is one thing to undertake military action for the just defense of the people, and something else again to seek the subjugation of other nations. Nor, by the same token, does the mere fact that war has unhappily begun mean that all is fair between the warring parties. End quote. So I appreciate that, because even though, yes, especially those who have the public responsibility of protecting the common good, that even in times of just war, that doesn't mean that you can just do anything in order to protect. That morality, the moral law, still has to come into play. So this is the whole idea that the ends can never justify the means. So doing an immoral act for a good reason, for a good end, is still very and completely immoral. So, Saw Gerrera is the antithesis of that. He's saying that, the enemy is the enemy. We show them no mercy because they showed us no mercy. The ends justify the means. He's going to torture Click Clack in order to get the information. And that's it's seen in contrast to Ezra in a very particular way, who very much recognizes that that's wrong. And Ezra is the one that the audience is probably relating to, that you just know that, yes, this is wartime. course, we all know that the Geonosian is not the enemy, even though Saw thinks he is. But we also inherently deep down just know that moral code in our own hearts that doing everything, anything, torturing to get the result you want, that there's something immoral about that. So again, there was just a lot of that happening here between Saw and Kanan and Ezra, and lots of good, but good. I mean, it points out the wrongness of that, which is important, especially for the younger audience that this is aimed at, is that the way that Saw is approaching this. Yes, he's on the same side as the rebels, but no, he doesn't have the right and the good path to that end goal that Kanan and Ezra and the Ghost Crew are trying to get to.
Yeah, and I like how they don't show Saw as like learning his lesson like right away. You think like when he makes that deal with Kanan that that would be the end of it, but you see obviously with the torture scene you mentioned, that just kind of came out of nowhere. He's like, you know what, I'm not gonna agree to this deal anymore. You guys are soft. I need to get this information out of them. So it shows like it's not so easy for someone who was obviously suffered trauma like he has, to kind of get that message through in his head that this guy is innocent and he has reasons for what he's doing and can't even sympathize with the fact that his whole race was wiped out.
Right.
It's really just it's being selfish, but being selfish in a way that's kind of influenced by that trauma. So it's like, again, you can still have sympathy for Saw in that way. He just has a kind of twisted version of what he thinks the greater good is, and like you mentioned, is he's at this point just thinks the ends justify the means. So I'm glad that they that these episodes treat his character with more complexity, with added touches like that.
Yep. And I think it's important to point out that this also shows what lack of forgiveness will do to you. So Saw has not forgiven the Separatists for the death of his sister. And so he is allowing that lack of forgiveness to fuel his anger and his rage, which leads him to live that extreme rebellious life that he goes into. Again, kind of put that in contrast to Kanan, who has had a tremendous loss in his own past. He survived Order 66, and Ezra, who lost his family from the Empire. Both of them have had very traumatic losses in their past, but they are dealing with it, in a different way. And I can't speak to how well or not they've forgiven, but there's more. Their actions suggest that they have come to a sense of forgiving, but still fighting to protect the good of the galaxy. And that's why they're fighting, not out of anger and rage, which is where Saw is coming from. So you've kind of got that loss doesn't have to mean that I will act or should act in a vengeful, wrathful manner, but loss in my own life, what I'm called to do is to deal with that, to heal, to forgive, and then to choose to do the morally right thing, which is what Ezra and Kanan are trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that's where having a belief system comes into play. They're Jedi, so that kind of helps them and guides them as to how to deal with these things. And like our faith, that's what keeps us grounded, and we looked at the example of what the church teaches us and the example of Christ and how he lived. So it's having that's important. And even though I'm not I have my problems, we all have our problems with how the Jedi with the Jedi preach and what they teach, but at least there's a code there, there's a belief system, there's a worldview there for them to have. And for someone like Saw, it's whatever worldview he had before is lost because it wasn't strong enough to kind of to keep him grounded and to kind of see what's in front of him and not be blinded by this trauma.
And that, you see the result of that in Rogue One, where he is just so unhinged.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this was good storytelling for sure.
Yeah, because even though at the end of this, he kind of he kind of saw like what he was doing was wrong. He obviously suffered even more, by the time we get to Rogue One. So that kind of that kind of just not justifies, but kind of explains why he's kind of off the rails, in that movie.
I was very happy that he had the moment at the end where he does finally recognize and is empathetic. At that point they find the gas canisters, the insecticide that wiped out the Geonosians, and Saw finally feels for Click-Clack. And actually, and I wrote it down that at that point he says, he gives him back he says the Geonosian should stay here, and gives him back, or removes his handcuffs, and he says, everyone loses family in war, even the enemy. The Geonosians deserve the same chance to rebuild as we do. So again, with the name thing, he finally doesn't call him a bug, but he calls him a Geonosian.
Yeah.
Which again, I thought was a really good way to highlight that struggle and what Saw had done. Yeah. I know we're totally skipping all over the place here. So,
right.
but that's kind of how these reviews go. So,
right.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I mean,
I think we're right. Yeah, I think we left off as far as like the
they had gotten to kind of
draw the Death Star for the first time.
Yep. In fact, that's yeah. So they're but that was back when Ezra finally names him Click-Clack and asks him what the Empire was doing on Geonosis, and that's where he draws the circle within a circle, and all of us watching are like, "That's the Death Star." And Rex thinks it's the rings. Those might be
the rings of Geonosis.
Right. Okay, come on, Rex. They decide to continue to investigate and go deeper into the tunnels. And Saw puts Click-Clack in handcuffs at that point, so he won't run away. Which, again, everything that you see of Click-Clack, he's scared, he's timid, he's not gonna put up a fight. He's not gonna run away. But Saw treats him that way. And Ezra picks up a hollow of Stela that Saw dropped, and points that out to Saw. And again, like, Saw's reaction to that was very harsh.
Yeah.
There's still deep pain there that he's reacting out of. But he does tell Rex that she was killed. Or that was all that Saw had left of his sister. And Rex tells Ezra that she was killed by a Geonosian gunship, which again is why Saw sees the Geonosians as the enemy, period, end of story. At this point, an Imperial cruiser shows up because the proximity sensor on the planet had been triggered, and they detect life on the surface, so they deploy recon patrol to check it out. And Hera goes into quite the craze as she sees the cruise on her scanners and tries to get Zeb and Sabine back and tries to get everyone back. But they can't get a hold of Kanan and the rest of the crew, so Zeb decides to take a transmitter into the cave to attempt to contact Kanan. And now is then when Kanan and the crew arrive where Click-Clack lives. And that's where Saw finds the gun. I had it written down here, but
well, yeah, you mentioned earlier. I'm forgetting it too.
Sonic something. But again, like, so Saw sees that as Click-Clack as a threat, and Click-Clack at one point when Saw's going through his things pulls out the egg that he's been protecting, and they recognize it as a queen egg and very rare. And Ezra then thinks that's what he thinks Click-Clack was trying to draw, an egg with the circle in a circle. Still wrong.
Very wrong.
Zeb finally gets the transmitter working and contacts the crew and informs them of the Imperial presence. And they decide to go back to the chasm and the shaft up to the surface where they can potentially find a way out. And they decide to take Click Clack back to their base and question him. After which point they will bring him back to Geonosis. That's what they're able to agree on between what Saw wants and what Ezra wants, because Ezra wants Click Clack to stay to protect the egg, and that's what they need to do. And Saw just wants to get the information out of Click Clack.
Yeah.
So,
and I just want to point out, I think it was right around here. It was a funny line where the Imperial soldiers, when they realize it's the Ghost, they're like, yes. "Oh, we're all gonna get a promotion if we destroy that ship."
Yeah. They're not exactly the smartest Imperials.
No.
Like that is
usually when the Empire gets wind of or gets some sort of like signal or something that triggers them to realize, like, oh, when they have these run-ins with with Ezra and Kanan and crew, they're not always sending the A team.
Yeah.
like we've mentioned before on with these earlier episodes that we've reviewed. It's not the best bunch, but every once in a while, someone like Darth Vader decides to show up, or to take care of business.
They're the only ones that have a legitimate chance of doing any substantial damage to the Ghost.
Yeah.
Because then it's they send a couple TIE bombers down to try to bomb the Ghost, and right. we get a reference to one of the best lines in Star Wars, and I'm sure everybody is going to completely disagree with me, but Sabine mentions that stupid sand, it gets everywhere.
Yes.
I thought it was a fun connection because nobody likes Anakin's line like that, but they were having issues with the sand clogging their barrels and trying to shoot the TIE bombers. So
hey man, anyone that spent any time in sand knows how annoying it can be. Like,
unless all you're thinking of
one
is
trip to
like,
the beach, I'm digging sand out of my shoe and my pants, for a week. Yeah,
it's all the people who don't live on the coast like me that just have this romantic idea of the white sand beach of Hawaii, and
right.
it's not that.
Yeah.
But they do manage to destroy both TIE bombers, even though the Imperials they know are going to send more down after them. And Hera takes the Ghost to that chasm and that shaft and manages to expertly descend into it to get down to Kanan and the rest of the crew. Conveniently destroying every bridge that's in her way. But
it's okay. Kanan can just levitate them back up if he wants.
As Kanan and the crew are going back to the chasm, Click Clack wants to take them deeper because he still wants to show them something. But Saw refuses to go with them, and they continue back to the chasm. We kind of learn later that Click Clack was going to take them, and they get there eventually to the gas canisters down at the bottom of the shaft.
Yeah.
The captain of the Imperial cruiser decides that it's a smart thing to take their ship down to the surface. No, that's not a good idea, but they do it anyway. The Ghost manages to descend down that shaft and get on the same level as Kanan and the rest of the crew, and they all board. And then this is where Saw is then introduced to the rest of the Ghost crew. And there was a really interesting point here because Hera asks about Click Clack, who is brought on board too, and Saw says that he is the only clue to what the Imperials did, and so Saw wants to take him with them. And Hera says, okay, what does Click Clack want to do? And again, I love that question because she is the first to actually see Click Clack and want to know his opinion and not just, use him as a means for information. So again, Hera sees the person behind the bug, which was crucial. And of course, that isn't what Saw wants to hear, and that's where Hera pulls Kanan aside and tells him that they need to be careful about Saw, that he's known to be extreme, and that's when Saw begins to torture poor Click Clack, trying to get information out of him. And where Saw goes a little bit kind of overboard and takes the egg and threatens to destroy the egg if he can't just take the shuttle and click clack and leave. And he tells Kanan that his methods are soft and that they lost the last war because of that, and he is not willing to lose this war. So he's willing to basically commit genocide in order to find out what the Empire's up to. And that's where he makes our enemy shows no mercy, neither can we comment, which is so wrong. At that point, though, that as they're kind of debating all of that, the Empire arrives. The cruiser has dropped down into the planet, and they've found him. And so they're trying. The Empire is trying to cut them off from the top of the shaft. And then we get some really cool fight scenes. They send some rocket troopers down to the Ghost. And this might be one of like the best scenes with Sabine ever. Yeah,
it was awesome. Yeah, and it shows you, even though those rocket troopers had the high ground, wasn't good enough for them.
Apparently, the high ground does not protect you from a Mandalorian.
No, not at all.
I loved her jetpack and her ability to fight off those rocket troopers. And I totally related to Ezra, who commented that he wants one of those jetpacks.
Oh yeah.
So I think everybody wants a jetpack. So they do fight off all the rocket troopers, and the Ghost lands at the bottom of the shaft. And that's when we have the moment where Click Clack shows them the gas canisters that were the reason for the entire wiping out of the Geonosian population from the Empire.
Ah, that's what he was drawing.
It's the Imperial logo.
Yeah, obviously.
That's it. Yeah.
So
but again, in their defense, that right. is the most logical conclusion.
Exactly.
So I get that. Saw has his moment of actual empathy when he realizes and sees the proof of the genocide that the Empire did, and gives the egg back to Click Clack and says that the Geonosian should stay here rather than pulling him off planet to interrogate him. And so Click Clack goes off to this other blocked passage, which goes even deeper into the planet, and he takes the egg with him and disappears down into the passage.
And they mentioned, maybe there might be other survivors. So
it may not have been a complete wiping of the population as they thought, which is definitely the hope that there are other survivors. The Ghost crew loads up a couple of the canisters as proof to the Senate of the Empire's atrocities, as if the Senate's actually going to listen to them and do something or have the ability to do something.
I know, right?
Right. Politics. Nothing's going to happen.
Oh, all you have are pictures? Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
Not good enough.
Well, it was obviously their testimony has no real weight.
Yeah.
Or pictures have no real weight, which that's still proof. That's
pictures. They hold.
Pictures can be sometimes doctored, but you can kind of check for that. But anyways, because they lose the canisters as they're trying to escape out of the shaft. The Imperials,
naturally.
right.
Yeah.
The Imperials attempt to bury the rebels by blasting the tunnel, and they really didn't do a good job. Hera had no problem whatsoever maneuvering around the falling rocks, and which one the ones that Ezra and Zeb didn't blast, she just flew around.
Right.
And then Sabine fires a couple proton torpedoes, effectively destroying the cruiser, splitting it in half, and the Ghost flies right through it and up and out out in space, which was some really cool piloting by Hera. Yeah. So kudos to her for that. The episode ends with they contact Senator Organa and inform them all they got was the images, not the canisters. And even though this isn't going to convince the Senate of the Empire's atrocities, which of course we knew that, Organa says that this is going to help other systems to join the rebellion. And they did get some successful information, not anything about the Death Star, but they also rescued Saw Gerrera, and they did acquire the Shield Core. So,
right,
they considered the mission a success. Ezra points out that they also gave Click-Clack and his race a fighting chance to survive. And Saw makes the point that they didn't find out what the Empire was building on Geonosis, and so that comes into play later. And it ends with Kanan sharing a little bit of wisdom and advice to Ezra, and he mentions, that not all their allies share the same values or fight the Empire for the same reasons, and that and I again, that was kind of the key of the whole episode, is that Saw and the Ghost Crew are on the same side, but they don't have the same values, and they're not fighting for the same reasons, even though they're still all fighting against the Empire.
Yeah, and then and it ends on with that line, like, he's proven that he's not the Empire, so that'll do for now.
Yeah,
it just shows like how desperate the rebellion is, just to have anyone as their ally, and and obviously they really don't know how big the threat is,
right?
And they're gonna need everyone, and obviously they're going to need everyone they can on their team, and we all know how it shakes out in the movies. But yeah, they understand how important it is to just kind of snatch anyone they can to be on their side.
Because I mean, even in Rogue One, it's the rebellion definitely distances themselves from Saw and his group. And rightly so. They're immoral in their extreme tactics. So yeah, it all it all works out until the First Order comes around, I guess. So
yeah.
Cool. Any other final comments on those two episodes?
No, nothing. Nothing really. But just again, it's really amazing how we seem to point this out almost every on every podcast, how a simple show like on the surface, like Rebels, what's an animated kids show can just be so deep and so relevant, and just with in 20-minute episodes, just covering all these sorts of heavy topics, and that where it's able to entertain kids and to sort of also indulge us adult listeners, and leave us with plenty to talk about. I can't say enough about watching these episodes again is really having a show having replay value like this is very rare, and I just love doing this podcast and being able to revisit them, because you come away with there's just the two of us tonight, and we've talked for well over an hour.
That's right.
Yeah.
Longer than some of our other episodes, even.
Exactly. Yeah. About these two episodes that, like you said, are really just one long episode.
Yeah.
And not a lot seems to happen. And, like we mentioned earlier, if you just sort of watch this episode, it was just a simple story about, the two different good guys with two different, ideologies kind of clashing, but all trying to fight for the same cause. But with all the added layers of the Star Wars lore and bringing up all the themes that are relevant today, it leaves you with so much more. So that's what we love about Star Wars.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Any good story, as well as entertaining, is insightful and educational, and it teaches you about the reality and the nature of good and evil and the way things work, without you having to feel like you're sitting in a classroom. It's a way to learn, but being entertained, and of course getting to play in the sandbox that is Star Wars. And that's really the fun thing that we we get to do, because we get to kind of pick it apart and analyze it, which is a lot of fun. So cool. Well, that is it from us this evening. Of course, listeners, what did you think of these episodes, The Ghosts of Geonosis? Be sure to let us know. You can email us or comment on our Facebook or our Twitter page and let us know what you thought. And you can email us any and all feedback at starwars@sqpn.com. And you can find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia and on Twitter at SQPN. And now, of course, like always, we would like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Wars, including Christopher R., Gabriel M., Father Jacob, John S., and Josh L. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows that we do here at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Also, be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or on the SQPN YouTube channel, and just be sure to click the bell to get notifications. Also, please be sure to review the show. That is definitely one of the best ways for us to get the word out there that we are a Star Wars podcast and more people can find us. So definitely review the show if you have some time. And you can find any and all previous episodes of The Secrets of Star Wars by going to sqpn.com/Star Wars. And we will be back in 2 weeks, and where we will continue in Star Wars Rebels. And this is going to be a fun one. We are going to be reviewing the final confrontation between Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we will be reviewing Season 3, Episode 20, Twin Suns. So definitely stay tuned for that. Until then, Andrew Hermes, thank you for sharing The Secrets of Star Wars with me.
Awesome, Father. It was a pleasure.
And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.